Absolutely. I think there's more and more, actually. I mean, I didn't take issue with Sean's sustainable intensification, but maybe if I have just 1 second on that. Because there are two camps in the future of agriculture. There are two camps. Sean's in one and I'm in the other. The land sparers believe that we need to sustainably intensify on the best land, thereby leaving all the rest of the land, including my farm in Wales, to be rewilded according to the philosophy of George Monbiot and co. The other camp, and I'm in this camp obviously, are the land sharing camp. And what I believe and what I've found from my farming practice over nearly 50 years is that if you farm in harmony with nature, you can produce remarkably good quality yields of food, which are nutrient dense, but at the same time those farming systems can coexist with biodiversity and wildlife in the field, not just around the edges. And Sean will say, don't want to tell him what he's going to say, the land sparers say you won't feed the world that way. I believe we can feed the world, but only if we change our diets and we realign them to the productivity of the sustainable food systems which need to replace the ones we've got at the moment. It means eating a lot less meat, but paradoxically, more red meat, grass-fed red meat, and almost no industrial chicken and pork. And that is a message that no one's putting out there, but we are owning at the moment. Because
why is that message not getting out there? It's such an obvious message.
It's such an obvious message, and the Eat Lancet report has a lot to answer for. There were 37 authors of the Eat Lancet report. Not one of them had any practical understanding of agriculture. And in the United Kingdom, which is a kingdom of 2/3 grassland, the best way to produce food out of the grass than which we need to keep in grass, because it's a great big carbon bank, is to graze it with ruminant animals, cattle and sheep. And if we eat the meat from those ruminant animals, we're part of the solution, not part of the problem. Whereas if we eat poultry, which everybody thinks, even David Attenborough thinks this, that we should eat poultry in place of meat, we're actually part of the problem, because the footprint of that poultry, apart from its welfare unfriendliness, is all the genetically modified soy and corn from the other side of the world. And people will say, yes, but what about the methane emissions of the livestock, the ruminant animals? Well, the methane emissions have been over-calculated, and there's some research from Oxford University just published recently, which has reassessed the methane impact of those animals, and it comes down a lot. And if you sequester carbon through mob grazing and these holistic grazing systems, which are coming into the fore now, you can actually... I'm going to visit a farm in America. Well, I may not be now, but I was going to be. In April, I was going to go and visit 4 farms in America, which are the leading exemplars of regenerative agriculture in the world. And research is showing that their systems are actually carbon negative, and they're all involving ruminant livestock. So we need to reframe this discussion, and we need to really question the orthodoxy, which everyone has swallowed, coming from the Eat Lancet report and other reports.
Andrew, is this an example of kind of what you were saying about concentrating too hard on the product and not worrying about the message or the marketing? And that message has got completely lost.
Yes. There's a simple answer to that question. But I was going to add, though, I mean, I have a lot of agreement there, but I was going to add, I think the sustainability debate is still in the early days, a bit like this epidemic. We don't understand it enough, and I come from the University of East Anglia. We've got some of the world's leading ag-food biotech scientists, and they don't agree on these things. And then even the scientists aren't at one about what constitutes sustainable ag, sustainable food.
That's right.
And there are tensions there that are real. So, and yet the market is failing and the planet is dying, which is why I agree with you entirely, market failure is before us.
Yep.
And normally, you've said it, the polluter doesn't pay. When you have market failure, you have to have regulation. So I think in my opinion, that's just my opinion.
I agree with that too.
So
you agree.
So you are reaching out to say...
Sean, you're being worrying quiet.
Storing it all up.
He's about to explode.
I was just waiting to get a word in. I bet we agree on vegans, but anyway, I'll leave that aside.
Yes, I think we do. Yeah. Bet we do. There we are. More agreement.
We actually also agree on sustainability. I agree that has to be the focus. And I would say 2 things. Unlike you, I believe that there's an industrial solution to this. You believe to turn the clock back and charge people more money. Back, I say. And put up prices. Well, that's the difference between us. You know that you can survive if people are prepared to pay a lot more for their food. I say that's morally indefensible. One should be striving to deliver the sustainable benefits which we need, but we should be striving to do it with the best that science can throw at us and in order to lower the price. And, you know, agriculture has made a lot of mistakes, but it was encouraged to go down certain roads. It's really, I would say, only in the last, you'll say 20 years, but I'd say last 10 years or so, we've begun to wake up to the climate problems and things like that. And people are now beginning to focus more on that. And I do believe that responsible consumers do care about those sort of things. And I also believe that ultimately, and it goes to Andrew's point, we can only do this if people are rewarded for it. I think we're going to be rewarded for it by working together with science. And you're absolutely right about farmers. My God, I've seen them all in my life, for God's sake. But it takes two to tango.
But can I just challenge what...
Very briefly, because I want to know what the next question
just to
is.
say, we're not so far apart, but what Sean says about it's immoral to challenge cheap food, the prices we're paying for our food are dishonest. They do not reflect the true cost of that food. We're already paying in hidden ways through health service treatment costs, through water bills, and through irreversible climate change. If those externalities were put onto the price of the food that we're currently buying, the apparently cheap food, it wouldn't be cheap at all. We produced a report on that.
Question.
Yeah, it's not a question, it's just a comment is to Andrew. It's a few years ago, I live in Canada, and I was part of a task force to try to make the small and medium-sized companies, which is form the majority of the industry, the companies in the food industry, more competitive and to convince them to grow. And what we discovered in Canada was that 80% of the companies, they were not interested to grow. So I was interesting because...
Were they food companies or all types of different
all
companies?
types, but what happened in Canada, there was a study. There was a very worrisome study saying that the medium-sized companies, instead of going bigger, they're going smaller. And the biggest increase in employment is in medium-sized companies. And that was produced by Business Development Bank of Canada. So they selected a group of experts to help companies to grow. And to our surprise, because the government said we don't just want to throw money or information, we want to give them management support and so on. And it was a group of about 20 of us who had expertise in growing businesses globally. 80% of them say, thank you very much, we are not interested. We don't want your money, we don't want your knowledge, we don't want anything. Thank you very much. So just not unique to UK.
Yeah, Andrew.
A few quick words. So what a great point, great observation. So I think 2/3 of our companies in our network are family firms, and we face exactly the same issues and challenges that, again, policymakers, consultants, advocates ignore. That just because we assume that everybody wants to grow, many family businesses want to be in existence for many generations, and they recognize that that's not going to happen if they grow too fast, because we all know what happens if you grow too fast. Your service levels go down, you can't keep up with demand, you go bust. And if you grow too slowly, then equally you're going to be left behind. So it's and many owner managers will see this steady as she goes as a very, very smart long-term strategy. That doesn't mean to say that they don't need to be aware of markets and how they're changing, because you can be steady as you go going out of business. But you're quite right that in allocating scarce resources, whether they're public or private, my time or my subsidy or my advice, then some qualification to the recruitment process, which is what are your business objectives, is a really smart place to start.
One interesting point we discovered in our task force is that we thought that the people who didn't want to grow their business were mainly elderly people that were planning to retreat. But actually what we discover is the younger generation, what we call them, lifestyle entrepreneurs. So they wanted to keep the business just to have a lifestyle, nothing else, not long-term.
I don't think they're entitled to public funding. Why do government departments fund those SMEs? Because they want them to grow and employ more people. If your objective is not to grow, then you don't warrant public funding, in my opinion.
But there is a big lifestyle change and a big cultural change coming with generational changes of what the younger generations see as the future of work. And somebody who's in their 20s now will on average have between 30 and 40 different jobs. And I don't mean just to mean a promotion. And somebody who's sort of 60 now will on average have 2 jobs. So the difference in turnover of what they expect, and I'm sure that would explain why they don't want to be the CEO of a massive company, because they can't see their life going in that sort of direction. So I don't know how that affects this industry, because you can't really have a sort of food industry with lots and lots of tiny little entrepreneurs. It certainly doesn't work for your vision, Sean.
It shouldn't work for anyone, for God's sake. We're here where we are to... Oh, you've got to wake up. We really need to recognise we're here where we are today, including you and your modern tractors and IT and God knows what else you're talking about. We're here today because people weren't satisfied with the status quo. They took risks and they changed things. And if we try to stop that, if we start going down this road of saying we should be quite happy to leave people to just carry on the way they are, that's the point that you were making about farmers. Too many farmers under public support sat there saying, I'm entitled to this living, I don't have to do anything about it. We have to change constantly because the world's changing, technology's changing, and we can't leave it behind. We either accept it and work with it to our benefits, or we're going to import more food into this country. You're not going to gain from this, my friend. You're going to be screwed.
Well, Patrick, as the farmer on the stage, and also you freely admitted that the business doesn't wash its face, that you have to have a day job to support, and to that's personal wealth in many ways that's coming from somewhere else.
Because
other than
I'm
the
operating
farm.
against an economic headwind, to use an aeroplane analogy, of 100 miles an hour of uncosted externalities. So it's all very well for Sean to talk about the moral importance of cheap food. But if the food isn't really cheap at all, because we're operating outside planetary boundaries and farming has been a kind of extractive industry and a mining operation, then we're being dishonest about our profits. We're profiting when the balance sheet of our natural capital is being diminished, and our human capital. The case I'd make for small businesses and small farms is that actually the human capital is a really valuable part of the asset base. And if we just don't value that, of course it's cheaper to have one pack house for all the carrots that Sainsbury's sell, which is in Peterborough, which is why I had to give up, 230 miles from my farm. There used to be several in Wales and in the borders, and they've gone. And so now horticultural production in Wales has gone down by 40% since the millennium, and that's because you can't get the products to market anymore. And that rationalisation, where you have one left, is that in the public interest? I don't think so. So we have to rethink about relocalising our food systems. Will there be a cost to that? Yes, there will. Is it worth paying in the public interest? Yes, it is. That's my problem.
But it's a thin line, Patrick, between, you make some good points there. It's a thin line between that and saying, I deserve a living, pay me what I need.
Yes, quite. And that's because the subsidies have been misdirected. They've been a social security check. That was a massive mistake. We need to change that, and we are going to change it. I mean, this phrase that Michael Gove introduced, public money for public goods, is basically right. Whether the government and DEFRA get it right is another question. But, we can hope.
Anybody burning to get a quick question in before we break? Yes, excellent.
Very quick. You talk about growth. The fastest growing area in the food industry. The fastest growing area in the food industry, I think we hear, is e-commerce and the likes of Just Eat and Deliveroo. We hear that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And if they see themselves as a tech company rather than a food company, and you talk about it's a winner-take-all type dynamic in that area, how do you see that disrupting or possibly helping your industry? Maybe a comment or a warning.
Are going to see themselves as an emergency service industry in the next few weeks, but that's...
I think you might be right.
That's another issue.
Here's another bout of agreement between me and Sean. I'm not anti-technology, and I think some of these disruptive new food systems which can have more vertical integration, they can help producers like me. But we need to think about how we apply them, because those technologies can be part of the solution, but they can also be part of the problem. And we need, like the prayer, to know the difference between the two.
And just to add, they are agnostic. So they're coming at this with computer science, with engineering, with no baggage, no history, no heritage in agri-food. They just have very smart people that will have, to the nth degree, insight into who's buying what right? So the agnosticism is if people will choose the global brands in favour of the local ones, they're the products that Amazon will stock. If Amazon tell us all, or the dot-com world is one where if it's not in the warehouse, people can't see it. It won't be in the warehouse if people aren't buying it. So it's not the job of the dot-coms, the aggregators, to stimulate demand. It's the job of the dot-coms to serve that demand at double quick time, probably at lower cost, which means it's the job of the people that make the products, back to the SME dilemma, to stir up demand. They can't do that by themselves. And we have failed as an industry to get people to collaborate. So it is a dark.
And I am failing miserably to get people to lunch currently. So, Sean, I'm going to give you the last word, if you can, in 30 seconds, and then we're going to break for lunch.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
No, there were a few phrases which were thrown around today, which I think we do agree on. The industry is changing. It's changing very rapidly. It's been driven by technology. We agree that we've got to be far more sustainable. We've got to do something about the climate. I believe that affordability is important. I believe technology can deliver it. I think, although I'm highly critical of those who think, like you, it's some sort of religion or something, people should be allowed to eat what they want. People should be allowed to choose. And I don't see any problem in a world, particularly where technology is helping information, with people who want to eat organic food or, God help me, go vegan or whatever. They should be allowed to. But they shouldn't spend their life criticising or denigrating mainstream industrial intensive farming. It's been very good for us and it can deliver the sort of things you want.
And on that note, I'm going to invite you all to go and partake of an entirely vegan lunch.